Hello everyone, Generation Y Conservative here, and the last time we were together, we were talking about Bernie Sanders. And at the end of that video, I had mentioned that I wanted to let people know in the next video where I stand as in regards to my politics as a constitutional conservative and how I got to that position. So I have to say, back in college, politics wasn't really a big thing for me. I had some morals and values in place in me by my family, but they didn't talk about politics at all either. And I kind of just slid through college and didn't have much of an issue with politics being brought up one way or the other. I guess you could say I was more of a moderate, middle-of-the-line person because I didn't really care either way what was going on. As time went on, I believe that for a lot of people my age and older, 9/11 had a huge impact on what was going on politically in our world and everything. And it really changed everything. Everybody knows where they were. And it got us to open our eyes because we were involved in wars all over the world and everything, but it never really hit home. We just assumed as citizens that we were off fighting for something somewhere and it was never going to hit home because it doesn't happen here. So when those towers fell, it really woke everyone up and kind of slapped them in the face or threw cold water in the face to America and said, hey, this is the kind of stuff that's happening all over the world. You need to start paying attention. Around that same time period within the early 2000s, I started to watch and get more involved in the politics and everything. And the first debate I actually paid attention to was the John Kerry-George Bush debate. Even with my high school experience of an economics class, I could tell that John Kerry was just floating BS. Some of the things in regards to supply and demand and how the economy works, that's the kind of stuff that kids learn in high school. And a high schooler could have been sitting there and telling anyone that was sitting and watching with them that John Kerry was absolutely full of it and that the economy doesn't work that way. Seeing as I wasn't too involved in politics at that time anyway, and I didn't really know where I stood, it was interesting that as I was going through college, I was working as a server at a restaurant. One guest came in that was with a group of people, and they were talking amongst themselves, and as a server, you kind of hear things and listen in on things to make sure that everyone's okay. And they started talking about Hillary Clinton running for senator of New York. I happened to go over to the table, and I said, oh, yeah, I heard that she's running. That would be a pretty good fit for her to be senator. Because she basically wore the pants in the relationship with Bill anyway while he was in the White House. The woman that was speaking of this gave me a very serious look and said, I hope you're kidding. And I said, no, why? And she said, because I was a female Secret Service agent for the Clintons during their presidency, and both Hillary and her daughter, Chelsea, treated female staff like crap, absolute crap. And they used a 4-letter term to refer to the females that no one should mutter ever. So I won't do it here even. And it got me to thinking. And the more and more I saw Hillary Clinton showing up in the news and the way she was treating people just on camera and her fake personality with people, the more it stood out and the more I realized that this woman had a great point and it was just being glossed over by everyone. So it was really interesting with that. Right around that time with 9/11, the Patriot Act was enacted. I realize now that as a Republican at that time, supporting the Patriot Act seemed like a feel-good thing on the surface, and it was okay. I mean, you had calls incoming to the United States from known terrorist supporting countries. It would raise a red flag in the system. The Department of Homeland Security would have to go and get a warrant from a judge to be able to tap into that line and see what was being talked about. And then they would start that process, and they would prosecute based on what they would find. And that seemed okay. But what you have to understand is when you give the government an inch, they take 10 miles. And so the Patriot Act has morphed into this monster now under the Obama administration, where they have this data center out in Utah that's massive with all these servers, and they collect metadata on everyone. Cell phone data with text messages and calls, emails, any electronic media that they process through the system, they collect on everyone. So now, instead of going and getting a warrant for that information and listening in from that period forward, they have access from that period in both directions, both backwards and forwards, and can prosecute you based on whatever they find. So it's like going to someone's house with a warrant and going in for a drug bust or something like that, but having a time machine to travel back and look through all the days prior to that and find everything else that went wrong for that person as well. So I think it takes a lot for people to admit when they're wrong and when their parties are wrong, because you get so enamored and so engulfed in the politics of what your party stands for that you have to validate some of the decisions that they make and make up all these excuses on why it should be that way, even though you're so disconnected from it at that point that you're just convincing yourself at that point anymore. Because the Patriot Act was a horrible thing, and the Republicans shouldn't have gone along with it, or should have limited the amount of access and control that the government had. So that set me off on this course from Republican to conservative. Now, what I found interesting about being a conservative is that it just wasn't enough. Things are still going wrong. The Republican Party is corrupt. The Democrat Party is corrupt. They both have their issues. The conservative people are getting pushed out, pushed around. They start bending over backwards and making deals. And that's the way the government works, and I understand that. But there's one thing that separates our country from every other country out there, and that's our founding documents, both the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution. The Declaration being this kind of overarching idea of what America was to become and how we were going to separate ourselves and why we were separating ourselves. Whereas the Constitution laid out this groundwork, this foundation for our country that allowed us to tell the government what their rights were limited to on how they controlled us. Because the Constitution isn't a declaration of our rights as citizens, but a negative limitation of what the government can do to us. Now, if we lose that, if we have people like Obama and people on the right like Mitch McConnell and John Boehner and Hillary Clinton and Bernie Sanders, who's an avowed socialist and could care less about the Constitution because he wants us to be like all the other countries that are failing in the world, then you have these people who are treading on this Constitution and want it shredded and gone and like a different type of monarchy or whatever it may be put into place, a dictatorship, authoritarian dictatorship, put into place to dissolve the Constitution and bring us to what these other countries are. Well, where do we go from there? America is the last country on earth that has these freedoms and liberties that we can pursue as individuals to make a life for ourselves, instead of relying on this equal balance scale of limiting people's potential and raising those that are unable to fend for themselves or do things for themselves to that same weight scale, and nothing gets done. There's no progress at that point. We experienced the Industrial Revolution in America because of the freedoms and the restraints being removed from the government. A short period of time that we were removed from the Revolutionary War, relatively to the amount of years that we've been on this earth as humans, to that Industrial Revolution that just completely made an economic boom for everyone around the world, especially here in the United States. So I guess you could say, while my channel was conceived as a Generation Y conservative, I have since then, back in 2007 when I started blogging and doing everything, become a constitutionalist, because I believe that if you filter all of your policies through the Constitution, it doesn't matter what your personal opinion is, as long as it goes through the Constitution and it's constitutional, then your opinions be on the wayside. Do what's right for America, do what's best and for the citizens, and filter it through those documents to make sure that it's something that's right for America, because we are the greatest nation. And we're starting to fail because of all these unconstitutional things that we keep on doing. I'm going to fill you in a little bit more on some of the controversial topics like education in America today. Abortion is a big one. We might cover the gay marriage issue and how I believe that those are two different arguments that are being made, and it's a clash of those that has caused that friction, and there's no need for it. We have a bunch more things to talk about, and we'll get into even finer detail on those in future videos. So I hope you stick around. I hope you enjoy. If you like this video, you can click over here to subscribe to my channel. And In the meantime, I'll catch you at the next video. Thank you.